Life. I came that they may have life, and may have it abundantly. St. John chapter 10, verse 10. In a word, he came to supply all our lack, from the root outward. For what is it we need but more life? What does the infant need but more life? What does the bosom of his mother give him but life in abundance? What does the old man need, whose limbs are weak, and whose pulse is low, but more of the life which seems ebbing from him? Weary with feebleness, he calls upon death. But in reality, it is life he wants. It is but the encroaching death in him that desires death. He longs for rest, but death cannot rest. Death would be as much an end to rest as to weariness. Even weakness cannot rest. It takes strength as well as weariness to rest. How different is the weariness of the strong man after labor unduly prolonged from the weariness of the sick man, who in the morning cries out, "Would God it were evening!" and in the evening, "Would God it were morning!" Low-sunk life imagines itself weary of life, but it is death, not life, it is weary of. Never a cry went out from the opposite of life from any soul that knew what life is. Why does the poor, worn, outworn suicide seek death? Is it not in reality to escape from death? From the death of homelessness and hunger and cold, the death of failure, disappointment, and distraction, the death of the exhaustion of passion, the death of madness, of a household he cannot rule, the death of crime and fear of discovery. He seeks the darkness because it seems a refuge from the death which possesses him. He is a creature possessed by death. What he calls his life is but a dream full of horrible phantasms. More life is the unconscious prayer of all creation, groaning and travailing for the redemption of its Lord, the Son who is not yet a son. Is not the dumb cry to be read in the faces of some of the animals, in the look of some of the flowers, and in many an aspect of what we call nature? All things are possible with God, but all things are not easy. It is easy for him to be, for there he has to do with his own perfect will. It is not easy for him to create, that is, after the grand fashion which alone will satisfy his glorious heart and will, the fashion in which he is now creating us. In the very nature of being, that is, God, it must be hard, and divine history shows how hard, to create that which shall be not himself, yet like himself. The problem is so far to separate from himself that which must yet on him be ever and always and utterly dependent, that it shall have the existence of an individual and be able to turn and regard him, choose him and say, "I will arise and go to my Father," and so develop in itself the highest divine of which it is capable, the will for the good against the evil, the will to be one with the life whence it has come, and in which it still is, the will to close the round of its procession in its return. So working the perfection of reunion, to shape in its own life the ring of eternity, to live immediately, consciously, and active willingly from its source, from its own very life, to restore to the beginning the end that comes of that beginning, to be the thing the Maker thought of when he willed, ere he began to work its being. I imagine the difficulty of doing this thing, of effecting this creation, this separation from himself, such that will in the creature shall be possible. I imagine, I say, the difficulty of such creation so great, that for it God must begin inconceivably far back in the infinitesimal regions of beginnings, not to say before anything in the least resembling man, but eternal miles beyond the last farthest pushed discovery in protoplasm, to set in motion that division from himself which in its grand result should be individuality, consciousness, choice, and conscious choice. Choice at last pure, being the choice of the right, the true, the divinely harmonious. Hence, the final end of separation is not individuality. That is but a means to it. The final end is oneness, an impossibility without it. For there can be no unity, no delight of love, no harmony, no good in being where there is but one. Two, at least, are needed for oneness. And the greater the number of individuals, the greater, the lovelier, the richer, the diviner is the possible unity. God is life, and the will source of life. In the outflowing of that life, I know him, and when I am told that he is love, I see that if he were not love, he would not, could not create. I know nothing deeper in him than love, nor believe there is in him anything deeper than love. Nay, that there can be anything deeper than love. The being of God is love, therefore, creation. I imagine that from all eternity he has been creating. As he saw it was not good for man to be alone, so has he never been alone himself. From all eternity the Father has had the Son, and the never begun existence of that Son, I imagine an easy outgoing of the Father's nature. While to make other beings like us, I imagine the labor of a God, an eternal labor. Speaking after our poor human fashions of thought, the only fashions possible to us, I imagine that God has never been contented to be alone even with the Son of his love, the prime and perfect idea of humanity, but that he has from the first willed and labored to give existence to other creatures who should be blessed with his blessedness, creatures whom he is now and always has been developing into likeness with that Son, a likeness for long to be distant and small, but a likeness to be forever growing. Perhaps never one of them yet, though unspeakably blessed, has had even an approximate idea of the blessedness in store for him.